3 notes. That's all it takes to create one of the most hauntingly powerful themes in contemporary film scoring. Let's talk about this Oscar-winning score, let's try to recreate its sound, and more in general, let's investigate what happens when minimalism meets uniqueness in music. I don't know if it's because of the reality that we live in today with multiple horrifying wars happening in the world, but when I first watched All Quiet on the Western Front, it really hit me like a ton of bricks. While researching for this video, I came across an interview on the website Awards Daily with Volker, where he says, "I was raised in a country where my parents were born before the Second World War, so in a way, I was raised in a country that has no consciousness for heroes. When I think about the war, I just think about shame and guilt and about all the things that were happening. When working on a film like this, you don't want to create music for a hero. I don't want to create any overt pathos. This is not music for heroes." Contrast is a key concept since the very beginning of the film, which opens with a quiet nocturnal scene in the forest and a family of foxes, which is very soon interrupted by the loud fighting and the chaos of the trenches. It's after this first scene that the most famous cue of All Quiet on the Western Front starts. It's called Remains and it deserves some attention. I just want to focus on the harmonic structure of this cue because I actually think it's quite interesting and it's a underappreciated work of genius as everybody focuses on the 3 notes theme. Let's listen to it. It starts with this E flat on the strings and there is also this middle C. So far that's the only thing that I've heard and my ear automatically goes C minor. It's a minor third. Of course, it could be an A flat major, but the tone, the setting, I don't know. I just heard a minor chord right away the first time that I heard it. And then suddenly, there's an F over here. So far you have these 3 notes, a C, an E flat, and an F, which could suggest an F dominant 7, it could be an F minor 7, I don't know, it's some sort of incomplete chord, and I actually don't think that the purpose of the harmony is to be tonal or functional at all. And then you have these famous 3 notes that spell out a B flat minor triad. So you have an F minor triad and then you have C, E flat, F, which is an incredibly ambiguous and suspended harmony, which I think is very, very interesting. This score makes you feel very uncomfortable, sometimes unbearably so, and a huge part of this, it's raw and often unconventional sound. We talked about a minimalist approach to the music, but there is actually an almost industrial aesthetic in the score, and it works very well as a way to portray the intolerable sound of the war. The instrument playing the theme in All Quiet on the Western Front is older than any synth and way more acoustic. It's an harmonium. The choice of this 100-year-old instrument is interesting because of course it's a hint to the time period, but the instrument is re-amplified through guitar amps, so there is this huge distorted bass that sounds really cool. I consider this very much sound design, even if it's not using a synth, and I think this is a masterful use of a signature sound, as we often call them. You hear these 3 notes play with this sound, and you know it's the score for All Quiet on the Western Front. Volker Bettelmann mentioned in several interviews that he captured the mechanical components of the organ placing microphones inside it, and you can hear these elements layered in very clearly. And these elements are not an isolated feature of the first cue and appear throughout the score. And an interesting thing to add to this might be the fact that in a couple of interviews I've heard Bertelsmann quote Einstürzende Neubauten, an industrial band I've absolutely devoured in multiple moments of my life, as an influence. I saw Einstürzende Neubauten live a couple of times, and it's a memorable experience. If you ever get a chance to see them, definitely do. And if not, check out their music. A thing that I thought would be fun to do is to try and recreate this non-synth sound on a synth. And I'm doing this using MiniFreak from Arturia. It's one of my favorite synths. It's very flexible, and that's why I'm using it. But as this sound relies so heavily on distortion, which is an element that tends to blur considerably the sound source you use it on, any synth really will do with any sort of engine. It doesn't really matter. And if the synth that you're using does not have a built-in distortion effect, you can use an external plugin. There are some great free ones. One of my favorite is Distortion by Kilohertz, which is free and sounds really good, and has different models of distortion which will do the job perfectly. So let's get started. So this is my default sound on MiniFreak. Right, and I'm gonna make sure that my oscillator 1 is on set to basic waves, and that oscillator 2 is set to Karplus-Strong synthesis. Karplus-Strong synthesis is a type of synthesis that imitates bowed strings. It's a physical modeling engine. It's really cool. I want to play quiet down here this area, so I'm going to set the first one to play 1 octave down and the second oscillator to play 2 octaves down. So let's turn the second oscillator volume up. I'm gonna rely on this octave, which I think, if I remember well, is the octave the harmonium on All Quiet on the Western Front plays on. Now, the second thing I'm going to do is to set up the envelopes. So I obviously want a pretty sharp attack, but let's add a tiny bit of attack, and most definitely I want a bit of release. This will work, and I'm going to use the cycling envelope, which is the second envelope in MiniFreak, to do a bunch of things, and I want to set it to rise just slightly later than the master envelope, and I'm gonna get the all set to more or less the same, and full, which would be the release, to something like that. Make sure that mode is set to envelope and not to a loop, as we want to use it as an envelope. And the very first thing that I'm going to do with this is to raise dynamically the volume of oscillator 2. So I'm going to find it over here. I'm gonna do something like that. I want to basically the volume of this to get up to almost the volume of oscillator 1 using the cycling envelope. Let's move the position to taste. I think I'm gonna need some sub from oscillator 1. What I'm looking for is this sort of interesting bit on the attack that is given by the second oscillator. Okay, now I'm going to use the same cycling envelope to modulate a bunch of parameters on oscillator 1. Let's just have a play with it. I want the morph to go up. Could even increase the timbre a little bit. I wonder if I could also modulate the bow a little bit. Not sure it does much. The bow is the simulated bow position. And I have a very good bass. It's nothing exceptional. It's nothing that you can do using any type of engine. It's all in the distortion. So I'm gonna go into the first effect slot and I'm going to find distortion, and I'm just gonna play around and find something that I like. Like the germanium, and now of course we want to close the filter. And I'm going to use the envelope amount, which uses the main envelope to open it. Let's close the cutoff completely. Gonna get a bit of resonance going. I'm gonna use the cycling envelope also to get some of the gain modulated, and maybe the dry and wet amount. I'm gonna close the distortion filter with the envelope as well. Sounds very good. The other thing I'm gonna do is gonna use a compressor in slot 2. So here there is a very good multi-comp, which has a preset which I use a lot, which is exactly for bass. It's called bass control. Here it is. And finally, we're just gonna put it in a space, so to speak. So let's get a reverb. Don't want anything crazy. Let's see if they have like a room. Yeah. That sounds cool, but it's quite different from what it is, which is in the original, which is quite closely mic'd. That's why I was going for like a room sort of sound. Let's try dark room. Something like that. So there is maybe a tiny bit too much sub. And there you go. It's not the same thing, of course, but it kind of serves the same purpose in a musical context. I just like to have fun setting up challenges like this, like trying to recreate on synthesizer instruments that are not really synthesizers, and I actually quite like this. And of course I would set it up to mono, if not legato, but obviously with legato the envelope won't retrigger, so it will sound quite different. So you actually want to get legato off because we want the cycling envelope and the main envelope to retrigger. I've actually played a bit more with it and listened to the original recording, and I think I got even closer. So I got germanium, but I got some more gain and tried a couple of things, and I moved the cutoff to be modulated by the cycling envelope, which has a tiny bit more of a attack compared to the main envelope. And I also tweaked the compressor setting. So now I think it sounds quite similar. One last thought that I have about this score is something that I think is particularly relevant in a moment like this one, where we feel our existence as creatives is threatened by AI. Whether you like the score or not, whether you like the film or not, I love it if you could give some thought at the level of research that Volker Bettelmann put in this score together. People want to work with people, artists want to work with artists, and this is all that matter. Doing this level of artistic research is the only way to be unique, something an algorithm will never be able to replicate, I don't think. If you've enjoyed this video and like the idea of learning to create your own sounds, maybe you like this other video about creating unique synth-based cinematic sound effects. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.